Hello, so welcome back to Interview the Interesting. I think this is episode 3 now, and today I have Kat Taylor with me. If you want to introduce yourself a little bit, Kat.
Hello. Yes, gladly. It's great to be talking to you today. So my name is Kat. I do quite a bit of freelance work, sort of educating people and working with people to think about what happiness means to them, how they can kind of increase their happiness levels, as it were, in their lives. And I also work therapeutically. So my background is working as an occupational therapist. I've always pretty much worked in mental health and worked at OTR for a number of years, and now work developing a boxing therapy program at Empire Fighting Chance.
Amazing. That sounds so. That sounds so good. That we were just talking before, but the boxing thing just sounds.
It sounds cool, doesn't it?
Yeah,
I just like being able to say that I work in a boxing gym. It gives me kudos instantly.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, yeah. So that is what the sort of basis of our conversation is going to be today. It's going to be around sort of well-being, happiness, and ways in which you can potentially improve or maintain and boost your overall well-being and happiness, really. Okay, right. So I will get on with the first question. So could you talk a little bit about what positive psychology is and how, when/why that movement started?
Sure thing. So positive psychology is it's brilliant in that it kind of came about, I was going to say organically, but it was quite sort of purposeful in that it was in the early 2000s, which I feel like wasn't a very long time ago, but actually it was about 20 years ago now. It's quite a long time. And it was basically a response, I guess, to traditional psychology, which how positive psychologists saw it, and it was led by a guy called Martin Seligman. So he's really worth looking up if anyone's interested. A response to traditional psychology, which they saw kind of was about looking at what was wrong with people, what was broken, what wasn't working. And it was about kind of saying, right, that's broken, or that's not working, or that part of you isn't good. We need to fix it. And what positive psychology saw was actually there's a place for, and they saw the importance in getting across the message to people that actually it's really normal to struggle sometimes. It's really normal for us all to find different things challenging, and for our moods to kind of vary and change throughout our lives. And actually what they wanted to do is help people to find ways that they can look at what's working, even when they're in a really difficult place, when they're going through adversity, to look at what's working, what's going well, and how they can build on and improve on that, rather than sort of saying you need to change the stuff that isn't working. Right. So they had a brilliant strapline, which was build what's strong, don't fix what's wrong, which in a nutshell, I think that kind of sums it up.
Yeah, that is brilliant. Yeah, we learned a little bit about sort of the inception of positive psychology in the movement, and I think he was like very high up in the sort of American Psychological Association, and he was given such a big budget, especially for like psychological studies and research. He was given such a big budget to put into that movement, which totally proved to be pretty influential and monumental in the sort of psychological sciences, really, hasn't it?
Definitely. And I think, as you say, that's actually a really important note, that it's really well evidence-based. So it's not one of those things. Often people, when you talk about well-being, when you talk about happiness, which we'll probably go on to, but a lot of people sort of think it's just kind of flaky, and it's, Definitely. What really is it? What does it mean? And, you can't prove these things. And although you can't sort of quantify people's happiness, they have done, as you say, if you look at any number of research studies in positive psychology, you'll almost always see Martin Seligman's name as one of the researchers, and they have gone to great efforts, great lengths to evidence and to sort of outcome measure how people can improve their well-being. So it's a really credible movement, and I guess now, because it has been around for sort of 20 odd years, it's become a really firmly established way of thinking, which is changing how a lot of people think as well about their well-being.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's really good that they've been so rigorous and robust in the way that they've tried to establish evidence, really, isn't it?
Totally.
Okay, right. So on to the second question. So, Kat, can you become happy?
I love this question. It's brilliant, and it's a really interesting one as well, because there'll be people, I'm certain there'll be people watching this, and in my experience, whenever I've worked with people therapeutically, and you ask them, because I do a lot of solution focused work, so
Right.
you know, the first question that I'll almost always ask people is, what are your best hopes from meeting me today, from coming to Off the Record or wherever it is?
Yeah.
And what people will often say, the majority of the time, is, I want to feel happy, I want to be happy. And without being too brutal, certainly with adults that I work with, the thing that I will almost always say is, there's nothing I can do to make you feel happier. There's nothing that I can give you. There's nothing that you can get. And I know we spoke about this. There's nothing that people can sort of obtain. There's nothing material that can make you happier. It's not possible. If there was, that would be brilliant. And we would all, I mean, philosophically, you know, you need ups and downs anyway, because if you never felt sad, happiness wouldn't mean anything. But you can't get happiness, you can't really achieve it. But it's kind of what I've discovered through the research that I've done and the kind of reading I've done, and sort of looking into the philosophy of happiness, is that it's often the byproduct of other things. It's often about living your life in a way that is congruent, is right for you, is in line with your virtues. Like we were saying with positive psychology, sort of using your strengths, thinking about things like the 5 ways to well-being, doing things that have been proven to help improve well-being. And that's often when happiness just comes. There's a brilliant quote by I think he's a 19th century writer, American writer called Thoreau. And he says, happiness is like a butterfly. The more you chase it, the more it will elude you. But if you turn your attention to other things, it will come and sit softly on your shoulder.
Love that. And I think that's really good.
It's so true. And again, it's annoying because it's kind of like, all right, well, how do I do that? But what I will always try and say to people is, happiness will come. And the most important thing to realize, I think, when it comes to sort of thinking about our happiness levels, is that our mental health, our well-being, our happiness is on a continuum. And throughout the day, it will kind of keep swinging back and forth at different points. But to remind yourself that whatever you're going through, however challenging it is, it will never last forever. You will always, or happiness will always come and find you again. But I guess thinking about your question, can you become happier? Can you do things to become happy? There's things that you can do that are proven to help enhance your well-being, which could lead to more happiness. So I guess it's about living a healthy, positive, constructive lifestyle, and that will potentially enhance your chances of being more happy. If that's not a really, really kind of
that was a really good answer. I just thought, as a caveat, I deliberately phrased it in such a way to get across the point that it's through my own research, and then also through just the brief conversations that we've had, Kat, it's happiness isn't sort of something that you'll eventually do loads of things, you'll get loads of things, and then you will arrive at happiness, and then that's it. You're done for the rest of your life. It's more of a continual process, a refinement of practice, of like anything really, like practicing how to play the piano. You got to keep doing it, and you'll get better and better. And it's the same with sort of psychological flexibility, such as that, isn't it? It's an overall, it's a journey. It's not necessarily a destination.
Absolutely, yeah. And again, this kind of concept that you can't possibly say that you've had a happy life, or that you've lived a kind of a life full of joy and happiness, until you're in your last day and you're looking back over it. And like you say, it's about the journey. It's another brilliant philosopher called Alan Watts has done a lot around this kind of thing. And he says, I forget if we talked about this before, and I can send you a link for a short YouTube clip, which is brilliant. It's my absolute favorite go-to. And he basically says we're sort of educated and we're brought up to believe from, you know, the age of 4 when we enter the schooling system, that life is about goals and about achieving, exactly as you were just saying, about sort of, you've got to work towards this. And then this will happen, and you've got to work towards your GCSEs or going to university or getting a job, and then when you get a job it's about getting a better job and getting a house and all of these things. And you know, even to the point of life is whatever people believe, you know, the meaning of life and what happens at the end of it all. And he says if you do that, you are missing the point, and you'll wake up one day, which a lot of people do, I guess, is what a you know, a midlife crisis is, where you wake up one day later on in your life and you kind of suddenly realize nothing's happened, nothing's changed. I've been working towards these goals and they just keep moving. And he says it's like a piece of music. If you were listening to a song, your favorite song, you wouldn't fast forward to the very end, because that's not the point. The point of the song is the whole thing. And so again, sort of taking the rough with the smooth, and actually life is about every moment. And it can be hard to remember when you're having a difficult or a low time, but it's about learning to sort of dance through life and enjoy each moment, rather than trying to get towards a thing which will not be what you sort of imagine it will be or hope it will be anyway. So no, that's I send me that clip definitely, because I want to check that out. That's really lovely. Definitely.
I'm going to move on to the next question, because I know that I could just add another 10 things onto that. So it follows on nicely, really. So what are some of the ways which we can improve our happiness or maintain our happiness and well-being? Like, what are some of the practical ways we can do it?
Cool. Good question. So, and you'll know this because we just chatted before. Some people might have heard of it as well. But I know that you said you're doing some work with the Resilience Lab with Off the Record with OTR, and they are all about, having worked with them myself, are all about sort of the different things that you can do. And I love what they say. And for me, this is the best place to start with this question, that it's sort of like having a toolkit. And it's about, there's no one thing that will make any one person happy at a particular time, but it's about having lots of different tools and seeing what works at that time. So I guess things that, and thinking about, like we were saying with positive psychology, the things that have an evidence base to certainly help improve people's well-being and happiness levels are things like working with your strengths. So, you know, if someone were to Google signature strengths, they could find out, researchers have identified the top 24 what they call signature or character strengths. It's things like humor, love of learning new things, determination. And it can be difficult to do because we're so sort of trained to talk about what we're bad at and what our weaknesses are. But one of the things that they say to do is to look at those, that list, identify what your top, say, 3 strengths are, and use those more often in everyday life. And there's been research to show that dramatically increases if people do that for, I think it was a 6-week period that they got people to do that, that it dramatically improved their kind of resting level of well-being. For a continued time beyond when they use them, I think for sort of up to 3 after.
That's really interesting.
Strengths is a really big one. Connecting with other people, so kind of like you do in Resilience Lab, reaching out, connection with other people. And actually one of the big things that can have huge impacts on our well-being, it sort of links together, is altruism as well.
Yeah.
So doing, and again, I think that's when the sort of this butterfly of happiness, when it comes and sits on your shoulder, is often when you are focusing on on sort of things that you can do to help other people, to volunteer, to sort of improve other people's happiness levels. And often that it's kind of like there's no such thing as an entirely selfless act, because doing things to support other people, I mean, you'll probably know this from some of the stuff you're doing at OTR, but it helps you to feel good as well, and you're doing purpose.
That's it. On the point of altruism, I remember reading something, and it was saying that like altruism is the most selfish thing that you can do, because you only do it because it makes you feel better. Because if you didn't do it, you'd feel bad. But that's like called the altruism hypothesis. But obviously, it's just a hypothesis and doesn't have to make philosophical sense, because it doesn't really, because it's going to increase your self-esteem. It's going to make you feel better if you do something helpful for someone else, isn't it? So
totally, yeah. And in that sense, you know, let's stop thinking. Let's stop sort of, or get out of the idea that the word selfish is a bad word, because actually it's great to be selfish. It's great to do things that will help you to feel better, because again, and if you think about the kind of ripple effect, like if I actively do things, like if I were to use my strengths, if I were to sort of volunteer or do things to help support others, and if I were to, you know, make sure I regulate all of the usual things like exercise, eat well, but also eat things you enjoy. It's not about eating fruit and veg all the time, and to sort of do things to support other people. If that makes me feel better, then when I'm chatting to you now, I'm feeling better, which will hopefully kind of give you a nice interaction and will add to your happiness, so on and so on. And it's the knock-on effect as well. So being selfish sometimes, doing things to make yourself happy, is a great way of sort of spreading happiness throughout the world.
Yeah, definitely. I just read a book called Think Like a Monk. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's
no, I haven't.
It's by an author called Jay Shetty, and he was a monk for he was a monk for 3 years, and sort of he talks about throughout the book about service, and how service for other people is obviously altruism. Service is integral for well-being, and then he goes on at the end of the book to have a whole chapter about service, and he essentially says that living in service is the way to a meaningful and fulfilled existence, essentially. Like being able to do things for other people and provide that sort of altruistic, charitable quality to yourself is so powerful for yourself and for other people, because it will not only improve your subjective well-being, but it will improve the subjective well-being of the people who are you're helping. So yeah, that's
definitely. And actually, we could almost, I think there is, I was going to say we can come up with a formula today, but I think annoyingly there already is one that's very similar. But I guess if you sort of couple those things together, so anyone who's watching, again, it's not about, you know, if it was me and I was thinking, okay, so volunteering or doing altruistic acts is good for my well-being, I wouldn't just go out and do anything, because again, if we can couple that with playing to our strengths. So I might think, and in fact there is up my road, there's a kind of voluntary cafe, and I've thought for a little while, obviously we can't at the moment, but when we come out of COVID, I'd love to go and volunteer there, because I love coffee. I like making it. I like kind of being creative. I love chatting to people, and sort of being around food and making things. So actually for me, that would tick the box of volunteering, plus it would be playing to my strengths. So double win. So again, I guess if anyone's watching, it's not about just sort of going out and doing anything that needs doing, but thinking, okay, how could I help someone or the community or whatever? And what are my strengths? What am I good at? What can I usefully do? And then, you know, that's when you really
in I think it's either in Hindu scripture or sort of the Pali canon of Buddhism, but they call it Dharma. So living out your Dharma is your passion and your strengths combined, and that's your yeah.
And again, you feel better, you spread the ripples and sort of have better, more positive, happier interactions with the people you meet. Because actually, if we think about, you know, in any given day, the interactions we have with people we meet, whether it's a conversation like this or whether it's someone that you sort of walk past on your walk to work or whatever, if that person's positive, if that person's sort of spreading kind of happiness, that makes us feel better, and vice versa. So again, kind of role modeling it and going out into the world. And it's not pretending that, you know, we can all go out singing and dancing and happy all the time, because that's not life, but doing the things we can. And I guess, you know, coming back to your question, there's no one thing that you can do, but coming back to that toolkit. And even when you really don't want to, even when you're like, I just want to sit here and wallow and feel rubbish, there's totally a place for that. But it's about at some point thinking, okay, let me just try this and see if it works. And sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it doesn't. But having that toolkit, having lots of different things that you can do that might help, I think is where it's at, really.
Amazing. Thank you for that, Kat. That was a really good response. There's a lot of useful information there. Okay, right. So on to my next question then. So what role, if any, does gratitude play in well-being / happiness?
Great. I'm glad you asked that, and glad that I didn't talk about that before, because I kept thinking about
I thought you were going to at the very start. I was like, oh no.
And I didn't. There must have been some reason. Gratitude is, again, so there's lots of studies that people like Martin Seligman have done to look at kind of the role of gratitude in improving our well-being. Now, gratitude is one of those things that I think, which I think is the case with a lot of positive psychology, has now kind of become a bit cliched. You know, be grateful for everything, or at the end of the day, think of 3 good things that have happened, or write a gratitude journal, which are all great things to do. And again, there's lots of evidence to show that they work, that they improve your well-being. However, again, it can be really hard when you're having a bad day, when you're having a bit of a slump in life. It can be really hard to do it, and it can sort of feel a bit like, okay, I'm a bit tokenistic. I'm doing this because someone said be grateful, but you know, I don't really want to. So it's a tricky one, I guess, but I think it does have a real place. And I think for me, where gratitude can be useful is, rather than the sort of it's called the Pollyanna effect.
Okay.
And people watching this is when I really show my age, because there was a film that was on when I was a kid called Pollyanna, and it was about this little girl who was like, her life was terrible and all of these bad things happened to her, but she was always chipper and everything was okay, and she always looked on the bright side. And what they say with gratitude and positive psychology is it's not about being like that, because sometimes you have to acknowledge. And what positive psychology has, where it's got to now, is that the good old Brits came along. So the initial first wave of positive psychology was led by researchers in the States. And then the Brits came along and said, let's make the second wave. And it needs to be about actually acknowledging the bad stuff, the dark. They say kind of it's about embracing the dark side of life, and that there's a lot to learn, and there's a lot of richness in sometimes being like, do you know what, this situation's really rubbish and I'm feeling really unhappy or sad or anxious. And actually, rather than kind of being like, it's fine, I'm feeling anxious, but let's pretend that everything's okay, and you know, then I'll feel good. You've got to acknowledge sometimes that life is bad, and that you don't feel like doing gratitude journals, or you have those moments where you think, why me? Why does this always happen to me? And actually, it's really important to acknowledge those times, to kind of be with them, to sit with them, to learn from them. And where I think gratitude can be useful is, rather than sort of thinking about things that you're really overly grateful for that happened that day, but it can be about little moments. Like I went for a walk earlier today and it was pouring with rain, and then it stopped raining for, you know, 10 minutes, and it was really nice, and it was like, oh, it's really sunny suddenly, and you know, it's exciting because spring's on its way. And I think gratitude can be, again, it can be hard, but can be about those really small moments, because when life is tough, then there may be times where there aren't any big earth-shattering things that you feel grateful for.
Yeah.
But about just the really small moments. And even if you are aware that you could be thinking about what you're grateful for, that's enough. Because I think it can make it quite unachievable and unrealistic to make people feel that they need to be grateful for everything that happens and that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, that's very true. I think that's a really integral and vital skill to learn and to work on, isn't it? That sort of ability to be able to recognize and be sort of self-aware about what's happening within your own life, and when to sort of be able to feel like, okay, actually, yeah, no, that's going not so well, and then look at other things and going, oh, that is going well, and then sort of I watched the TED Talks the other day by a researcher called Dr. Lucy Hone, and she was talking about how resilient people often attend to the positive things in their lives whilst being aware of the negative things. So and then another video I watched the other day, it was by a philosopher neuroscientist called Sam Harris, and he was saying, it was actually in his book, actually, he was saying that a while ago his ceiling started flooding with water, and obviously he was in like absolute like despair, like, I can't believe this is happening. But then his wife was like, well, at least it's not like sewage water and it's clean water. And he was like, I was grateful for the fact it was like that. It was that situation rather than in even worse situations. So that was just a tiny thing, but yeah.
It could always be worse. That's the thing. And I think it's reminding ourselves of that. And again, allowing ourselves to feel, and I guess for him, allowing himself to be like, oh, this is really annoying and I'm going to have to get out of the plumber and this is stressful. However, it could be worse, and kind of just keeping hold of that insight. And kind of realizing that, again, it can sound a bit profound, but that you can find a meaning or a use in everything, but sometimes it's not until you've come through it. And that's where I think appreciating and embracing the difficult and the negative and dark times is useful, because sometimes it's important just to be in them and just to be present and just to be like, this isn't great. And, you know, I wish I was feeling happier. But when you've come through them, looking back and thinking, what did I get from that? What am I grateful for? What did I learn? So kind of having a period of reflection after you've gone through difficult things can be useful as well.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, definitely just from sort of circumstantial things like in my life, you recognize that the bad things you go through, like at the time, your well-being is suffering, but then retrospectively, it's you actually gain so many insights that you would never have learned otherwise. It would never have come unless you had experienced that one thing. So,
not at all.
That awareness is also really important, isn't it? I feel like that's a really profound thing to be able to sort of take a hold of.
Totally, and just to remind ourselves when we're going through something difficult.
Exactly. Okay, so on to the fifth and final question, Kat. Do you have any film, book, documentary recommendations about this topic area? And then who is someone who has inspired you in this topic area?
So I would say, and my initial thought is the kind of the book recommendation and the person who's inspired me are the same person.
Yeah.
So in fact, probably TV shows as well. So Darren Brown, I think most people know of him. I know he doesn't do so much stuff now, but Darren Brown, who is, you might be like, what? But he's like an illusionist. He's a magician.
Yeah.
He's written the most fantastic book called Happy. So Happy by Darren Brown. I know, Fred, you and I have had chats about this, because again, it can feel really unobtainable. Particularly, I haven't got it here. I've got it. Do you know what? I have. as
Yeah.
well. God, how good is
There we go. Perfect.
I was actually using it to wedge to rest something on this morning. I don't carry it around with me, but it can look a bit unachievable because it's quite big. But I know we've both chatted about how do it the way that works for you. I don't read books at all. I listen to audiobooks, and it's a fantastic audiobook. And what it says on the front, which is why I love it, and this is why I would recommend it, is it's happy, and the subtitle is why more or less everything is absolutely fine. And he goes through, he looks at research, he kind of mines ancient philosophical wisdom from Aristotle and Plato and all those people that you hear about at school and are a bit like, oh god, they sound really boring. But actually they had some fascinating things to say about happiness, what constitutes the happy life, and why he's got that subtitle, and why I love him and why I find him so inspiring is because he kind of says, you know, the self-help industry is a scam. There is no book that you can read that will make you happier. There's no thing that you can do, all the stuff that we've talked about, but it's about just, again, kind of dancing through life, weathering the storm and trusting that it will always be okay. It might not always be great. It might not always work out, but it will always be okay. You'll always find a way. And why I love that he role models that himself. I've just realized the sun's shining on me, I'm
right.
I'm like turning into a ghost.
It's fine. The spotlight's on you. It's perfect.
As I talk about my final thing.
Fully enlightenment.
And what I've been watching them. They're on 4OD.
Yeah.
I think I can advertise stuff on here. It's not commercial radio or something.
Sure, yeah.
So if you go on the channel 4 like on demand, you can get most of his shows on there, and the Derren Brown specials are brilliant. I've just been rewatching a lot of them, and in terms of sort of happiness and what we can do and sort of how to live our lives, I won't sort of tell people what happens, but if you look at Derren Brown the specials and the way that he uses his skill in his book, he sort of says, I didn't really care about making money. I just loved doing magic, and I wanted to find a way that I could make a living doing that. That's all he's in it for. And turns out that he's had a really good career doing it. But in the specials, he sort of finds ways of reaching out to other people who are perhaps in a bit of a rut. Their life hasn't turned out quite how they want to, or they're really low in confidence and they don't like themselves. And he uses his kind of amazing trickery and skills to help people to have real sort of epiphany moments where they're suddenly like, all of them are about helping people to realize, actually, this is it. You know, let's make the most of it, and life will be difficult at times and happiness will come and go, but let's just enjoy the process and make the most of what we've got. So check out Derren Brown. That's what I would say. He's
since we had our first chat, I put all the books you recommended on my watch list, so I'm definitely gonna, when I get the chance, buy his book. And because I mean, I just remember being like absolutely enamored by him. Like, he was just so incredible. Like, the things he would do on TV, it's like, that is mental. Would you call him a mentalist? Is he a mentalist? Is that the same sort of?
I don't know. I guess so. Yeah, I don't really know what the term is, because that's the thing. He's not really an illusionist, and he's not really a magician per se. But I love that he is clearly intrigued by this topic. He's actually written another version of Happy, which is much shorter as well, if people want a kind of quick go to, and it's got loads of techniques and tips and practical things that you can do to help with your well-being. But I love that he's got those skills. He's a great magician, but he's kind of like, how can I use this to help other people get the most from life, which no one's ever really done. And he himself will say that, you know, he's really introverted. He doesn't particularly like performing or being on stage, but again, I love how he's role modeling that. You know, he'll say things which made me feel way better about myself. Like, he can't bear the idea of having a dinner party and having loads of people around his house, and
Oh,
you're like,
really? Yeah.
oh, it's not just me.
Yeah, yeah.
you,
There's others.
you hate
Yeah.
having loads
Yeah.
of people around and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and again, someone who's actually being honest
Yeah.
about how it's fine to have weaknesses and things that you're not good at or don't like doing, and that's normal, rather than a lot of these sort of Instagram and social media images and lifestyles that we're fed these days. So
Yeah, that's nice. I think it's important to sort of keep a hold of that integrity and not become superficial. And it's good that he states that he doesn't care about money, and he actually is just doing it because this is what he's found in his endeavor, and that's what's working, and that's amazing, isn't it? I can't wait to read that book. I think we'll wrap up there, just because we could continue to talk forever. But yeah, thank you so much again, Kat. I really appreciate it. It was amazing having a chat with you, and hopefully
it's been great.
Part 2 might come out, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. I'm always happy to talk happiness at any time. Give it a shout.
Amazing. Right, so thanks for that, and bye everyone. Till next time.